and we're live. It's Freedom Friday once again. Happy Freedom Friday to everyone. To my brother Sharif El-Mekki, who has returned again. As usual, set your clock by it every Friday. Good morning, brother. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely. Good morning. Glad to be here. Freedom Friday in this last Freedom Friday of June.
It is, such a good time for a Freedom Friday and to talk about our topic today, which is freedom schools, a topic that I feel like I thought we had covered, but we have never honestly done a show on it, like a full show on it. It seems to come up, though, when we talked about the independent Black schools, when we talked about independent Black school movement, when we've talked about the Alamo, the Black Alamo of education, which was the 1968 riots or educational boycotts and breakdown in New York in 1968. And when we talked about the 5,000 Black schools that were built by Booker T. Washington, we always see the genesis of the idea of Black people can run schools. They can run schools that tell their own history, have lots of energy, change the way that you plan the day, have some respect for different types of students. Like, I don't know if it's kinesthetic or whatever, like the kids that like to just be, more quiet and introverted, the ones that like to be more extroverted, the ones who need action and to move around. So it's a perfect time. Let's talk about freedom schools today. El-Mekki, where do we start, man? Where do we start?
So, the context that you just gave, I think, immediately after emancipation, we know even before that, people were stealing away in barns, trying to teach, each one teach 1,000 or each one teach one, whatever your capacity to do. And so that's the legacy of it. Like everyone constantly, you learned a letter, you learned a word, you shared it with someone. Right. There's a tax on everything. The tax on education and learning is to share it. Right. And so that was the philosophy of Black peoples in these country. And then what you did, we talked a lot about this of, as you said, Booker T. Washington, and even independent of Booker T. Washington and the massive philanthropy that he was able to access, there were folks who were just building schools. We told the story a while ago of that elderly Black woman who came to a meeting where they were discussing how to build schools. People were donating cows and lumber and time to build it. And this elderly Black woman showed up and said, all I have is this copper penny, but it is for the education of Black children. Right. So that's the legacy of it. But then you fast forward to the 60s. Where the MFDP, Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, was challenging the traditional Mississippi Democratic Party, and this is Mississippi in the 60s, where people were just like, I believe in civil rights and I'm going to march everywhere else, but I'm not going to Mississippi because they were so rabidly racist and so just defiant about treating people as human beings, that it was just extremely violent. We told the story of Charlie Cobb, who initially wrote the essay to SNCC to organize the freedom schools, right? Because they were already down there to help organize people in voting, to try to get the MFDP established, to challenge, to either force the Mississippi the people in power in Mississippi to change, or to force the government to come in and intervene to protect the constitutional rights of Black people. So that was their game plan. They're like, either way, we're going to do one or the other. Somebody is going to make some changes. And these were youth. Charlie Cobb was on his way to a core meeting in Texas, but decided, like, you know what? This is where Emmett Till was murdered, and they're doing all of this work. Let me just see. So Charlie Cobb, the initiator of freedom schools in Mississippi that we all have evolved from, he stopped in there just to see. And when they found out, when somebody, he got with the organizers, the Black folks who were there, and they were like, "You going where? You going to a damn meeting? We here working." He's like, "Well, I'm going to the meeting to learn. They're going to train us how to be activists. So then I can." They're like, "You don't need to go to a meeting in Texas to train how to be activists in Mississippi. Don't get back on the bus. Stay here. You'll learn on the job." And so Charlie Cobb jumped in and started working with SNCC instead of CORE. And from there, he eventually wrote an essay to say, like, hey, you know what? The SNCC was moving from a protest organization to organizers. It's like, part of this organization, we should really work with students, not just the parents, but how do we work with students? And from there, Freedom Schools was born.
It's such important history because, the tradition of activism and civil rights, the civil rights battle and fight, to the extent that it includes education in schools and young people, it's often framed in terms of integration and integrating our kids into the school districts that were preventing them from entering. There were places, there were schools that said you can't come in these doors. So the real fight and push was to get them through those doors. The real radical aspect of Freedom Schools, the thing that they add to the landscape is, no, we're actually activists. We're activating for more than just being integrated into somebody else's burning house. We're actually activating the mind, like the young person. We want people to engage in freedom. We want them to run something. And that starts with schools, like with running schools. So
Absolutely.
You're in that area of time, the 1960s. I think it's 1964. You have a very hot summer in Mississippi, 1964. You have a gang of white people who suddenly decide they're going to put their lives on the line. They're going to leave the North. They're going to go down to the South into Mississippi and be activists. And the Black folks who are going to be responsible for them are faced with the decision like, oh my God, how are we going to keep these white folks alive? First of all, we need them here because Mississippi is a good case study for what happens when you don't have any outside attention, when people are able to just run their campaigns of terror privately, locally, and the world doesn't watch. So all of a sudden now the world's going to watch because good white people, including good white women and good Jewish people from New York and others, are going to put their lives on the line, put their bodies on the line, come down South. And the Black organizers who are responsible for them and need to help train them or whatnot, feel like the schools is a good place to start. Feel like, because you have at that point in time, you have districts closing public schools because they don't want to integrate. And they're whole groups of Black kids who are getting no education at this point. I do want to say this because I always give the AFT and the NEA a hard time. I do want to say that the AFT organized teachers from Detroit and New York to go down and do summer instruction for like 3,000, 4,000 kids, specifically because they knew that they were going to be losing learning time because of all the turmoil in the schools. So they said basically what they could do now that they don't do is, they said back then was, we could set up pop-up schools with the Freedom Schools people, and we can send real teachers down there, and these kids won't lose any learning time because we're doing this. So anyways, that is the historical context for what Freedom Schools are. How do they evolve? Like, what happens from there? We have this summer, but then what happens after this summer?
Yeah. So what they really tried to do, and I just want to give a little bit more context of like why the genesis of it. It wasn't just to push back, but Charlie Cobb, who wrote that letter, who we brought up before because he wrote that book, that nonviolent stuff will get you killed. So the same one who wrote that book, he also wrote the essay. But what he talked about was, we need freedom schools, not just in Mississippi, but we need freedom schools in general because of the repression of intellectual curiosity and different thinking of Black children. That there's an intellectual and creative vacuum, that there's a lack of academic freedom, that there's a lack of the Black voice in the creation and establishing of schools, and that we should have schools where Black people get to articulate their own demands, their own desires, their own questions, and ultimately have academic freedom. And so when we think about, and so I think that was really the genesis of really starting a whole lot of, just thinking. And because, as you said, people were going down to the South and learning a lot. People were like, whoa, we need to do this. And we saw that same thing as like, when you said they were using curriculum from various places. They wanted the students, when the students finished, they wanted them to have, not only exposure to academics, but contemporary issues, cultural expression, leadership development, the history of Black people, and the history of Black liberation movements. And they wanted these students to be able to hone their political skills. They understood that education is political. And schooling and education, as we often say, are not the same things. And particularly political education of young people is absolutely crucial. And it's easy to do. All you have to do is tie it to contemporary issues and look at history, and they will be politicized because the just how people have spent so much time and energy and money to suppress Black people in America. That's political in nature, and so the resistance in itself has to be political. So this idea of freedom schools, eventually it started being individualized, and different groups and different organizations did things. And then Marion Wright Edelman in the 90s, Children's Defense Fund, said, you know what, we need to bring this back. This idea of these detox centers, this out of school time support for Black children, we need to bring this back and make sure that we are organizing it in a way that can support, wherever you are in the country and you want to do that. So Marion Wright Edelman in the 90s, I think around 92, 93, said, you know what, we're going to use the our privilege at CDF and help support. If you want to have a freedom school wherever you are, we're here to support you in doing that.
What is different though about like doing a freedom school in terms of the politics, adding politics or activism to the agenda, preparing kids for the world differently than like regular schools would do? I mean, it's not just about reading and writing and stuff that I really care about those things, but there's an additional element. What's the additional layer? What's the additional layer there?
I would say the additional piece is this idea of really supporting the positive racial identity of students. So one, the political education that we mentioned, but then when you have a distinct goal to positively develop, support the emotional, cultural, intellectual well-being of a Black child, then you're on a different type of mission. A lot of folks, that's not the mission that they are on when they join teacher colleges. It's not the mission that professors are on when they are working in teacher colleges. And then when they graduate and go to schools, they are certainly not on that type of mission. Right. And so what you'll have pockets of people who have that awareness and have that understanding, and then they jump in. Freedom schools, the idea was like when a teacher is hired, that they understand that students are their job is to prepare students to challenge the myths in America, to destroy those myths, to find solutions and new directions to further Black liberation. And so what you have in freedom school is a very distinct call out. There's a banner, and on it is written Black Liberation Movement. That's not how schools are typically created or funded or looked at or viewed. And people certainly don't always run to work with that kind of fervor to say, oh yeah, I'm here for Black liberation. And that's
especially when they're going to teach. How many teachers woke up this morning saying, listen, I'm getting in my car now, I'm going to a school, I'm waking up in service of Black liberation. That's why I'm going to do this job as an educator right now. How many people say that? Exactly.
But when you're hired at Freedom School, when you work at a Freedom School, that is the mission. Like that is paramount. That is front and center, and that's what you're working with every single day. That's what you're dealing with. And people realize even outside of Freedom School, like you're supposed to, Cochran Smith, once said like school systems need educators who regard teaching as a political act, and educators who embrace social change as a mandatory part of the job. So people are exhorting that, but freedom schools, I believe, put it in action like nobody's business. And from that, it evolved to other schools like Nithamu Sasa, which is full-time. Dr. Aisha Imani, who's here and created Sankofa Charter School, which is a full-time, year-round freedom schools, right? And so that tradition continues. So what you had was the CDF model, but then what you have now were different variations, like at the Center for Black Educator Development, we wanted to make it a teacher apprenticeship program in addition to all the other things around the political activities and things like that. Philadelphia Freedom Schools, which has been around for 20 years, and initially was a partner with CDF, and then kind of wanted to do really create something in the context of Philadelphia. And they did something that was really like absolutely crucial, that was different than what SNCC did and different than what CDF did. What the Philadelphia Freedom Schools model was adding a high school component. So instead of just having the adults, the college students, the teachers coming in and teaching freedom schools to children, that's fantastic. But what Philadelphia Freedom Schools did was just such a brilliant move of saying, you know what, our future and the hope of the future is tied into our youth. So let's bring them into this process. And so what you had was high school students working with the college students to teach younger children. So the high school students, it's that intergenerational model where we're all supporting each other. We're all lifting as we climb. And at the center, we've adopted that model where we have high school students, college students working together to teach first, second, and third graders. And we're using it as a teacher apprenticeship program. So not only are you going to do this to support students and their literacy and their political awareness and their positive racial identity, but you are also learning how to teach with Black pedagogy, right? Like how are Black teachers effective? And that's what we've modeled. So we always stand on the shoulders of other people, and we're trying to iterate based off of their successes, the lessons that they've learned. And we're just honored, at the Center for Black Educated Development to say, hey, we learned from Charlie Cobb and SNCC. We learned from Marion Wright Edelman and CDF. And we certainly learned from, folks like Dr. Greg Carr, who I hope we can get on the show, Dr. Aisha Imani, Dr. Kelly Mickens, and Sister Erica, and many, many others who've done that. Actually, somebody pointed out to me, a lot of the trainers, the coaches that we have right now in our organization, they were previously trained and grew up in Philadelphia Freedom School movement. So it's this passing of the torch. And, in Philadelphia Freedom School, all Freedom School, they talk about train your replacements. That's how you know you're doing well as an elder. Did you train your replacement? And a lot of times you see a lot of our elders, unfortunately, they don't want to let go of the baton. They're like, no, I'm in this position forever. Wu-Tang forever, my leadership forever.
Right? You just described like Black nonprofit in a nutshell.
I don't care if I'm 100.
Right.
I started this 100 years ago.
I brought this organization into the world. Now take it out.
Exactly. You try to take it. So it's the exact opposite of that. Who train your replacements now. And what better way to do that than involve college age youth, high school youth who are teaching first, second, and third graders. And a lot of Freedom Schools, it goes to, they service all ages, but we very specifically wanted to service early literacy grades, first, second, and third graders in the fall, because we felt that high school and college students would be better positioned to teach them phonics and literacy. And so, it's been fantastic. We had 112 spots, man. It filled up within a week. And, we have a wait list of about 30, 40 people. And it's, initially we were in person, we were just in Philly, but because we're virtual, people started signing up from outside of Philadelphia, which has been fantastic to be able to, access various communities.
What's unique about the Freedom School legacy or lineage is that it is a pro-Black educational intervention. It's an intervention specifically to work with Black children and get them in the practice of their own freedom, for one, to make school a thing for them that is about them and engaging in a way that keeps them moving and excited, keeps their energy levels up or whatnot. So it's specific to rescuing Black children out of the nihilism of Americans' racist kind of structures and put them into a place where they can be free to learn. They can be free to be kids, learn, feel good about themselves because there's a mirror on themselves and what's best about their culture in one place. It's also one of the pro-Black educational interventions that does have a role for white people to play also, though. Right. And you think about SNCC and the genesis of that, they were fighting for Black freedom. They were fighting to put attention on the plight of Blacks in the South at the time, specifically in hotbeds of racism like Mississippi, even though we can argue the entire United States is a hotbed for it. But they were looking at training young white people to be real social justice assistants, real social justice workers, not the kind of plastic social justice worker that we try to turn out today, where people get to read a book, spread a few hashtags, get in your face with some sort of, hyper leftist Karen activity to virtue signal. But no, not that. You're actually trained by Black people and Black activists to be useful.
By
to Black people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for Black people, by Black people who are saying there is a role for you to play. Come on in and let us help you. And you know what? Today in Freedom Schools, you find that same pattern happens still today, where you can be a white ally and do real justice work and social justice work, and there's a place for you to do it, but it's for Black people and by Black people.
No, absolutely. I mean, this whole thing of woke on the web has to go. If you're woke on the web, but there's no evidence. Your family, your friends, you're in your school. Nobody sees any evidence. Your students' outcomes, there's no evidence that you're actually woke. But that woke on the web is it's problematic. And I think the key point of what you said,
hell, bro,
I love
problematic is problematic now.
Yeah.
I didn't used to know what that meant, but Charles Cole started saying to me, I hate problematic. I'm sick of problematic. This shit ain't problematic. It ain't a problem for nobody. And I was like, bro, you gonna cancel problematic now? Because we're canceling woke, right? Now we're gonna cancel problematic, and I just think, yeah.
There's a quote, Dr. King, and I'm actually researching this just for my 8 Black Hands crew, where Dr. King talks about what being woke means. I'm going to find that. It's in the library somewhere, and I'm going to bring that. And so what we're going to do is, I don't want to cancel woke. I want to clean it up and reestablish it.
Oh, hell no.
No,
just let it go.
Just let it go.
Yeah, woke is dead. Woke was on the cross hanging there with 2 other, criminals next to it. The other criminals were like, woke, what would she do? What should we do? And woke was like, we about to die. Resurrect me at some point. And make me real at some point. For the next 3 days, for sure, I'm dead. Well, we in the 3 days, and there is no resurrection coming for woke anytime soon, because the brothers done messed it up. Like woke is the new sleep, bro, and it has been for a minute. So let's just leave it alone. How about we just be conscious? Because that's what we've been trying to be for years, for decades. Is just straight up conscious.
Yeah, conscious and active.
Conscious and active. There you go. Woo. Consciousness and action. And if you put that into educational terms, like what would be the conscious thing to do for children that we know are purposely marginalized by the American system, and we want to help them break out of that. We want them to be free. We want them, you're 6 right now, 6 years old right now, and you're in the beginning of your educational career. 12 years from now, what is it that we want you to land in? Well, for sure, we're in the wrong plan. If that's what we're thinking of, if it's our goal to figure out how a 6th grader today becomes a fully active, culturally affirmed, culturally confident and skilled academically person, when they're 18, like when they're going into college, we have to do something radically different right now. You and I talked a minute before we jumped on the call, I think today, before we jumped on this show, about starting small. So there are people that want to go out and run out and start a massive school or a big something or other. They want to do the 1,000 pages it takes to get a charter school or something like that. Think about freedom schools is they can start almost anywhere with almost any small group of people, which makes it a hell of a lot more democratic to be able to get in on the action. What's your thought about being able to start small with these things, and you don't have to be a formal organization yet to make it happen?
Yeah, man, I 100% agree. I think, people sometimes take on, and sometimes I don't know if it's just frustrations of like, what, this is such a mess. I want to take it over. And they I got to start a school with 1,000 kids. I got to save everybody at the same time. Or if it's ego and saying like, oh, I can do this and I can do it, not realizing like how the responsibility of being responsible for one child, let alone 100 or 500. Like that is such an immense responsibility, such a challenge. And we don't just, when we take on these large projects, it's not just the passion that's going to fuel. The passion alone doesn't educate children. Passion alone doesn't teach Black children, literacy and numeracy. You need some technical skills or partners with the technical skills to be a part of that. Right. And so one of the things that we can always do is let's commit. If everybody who is conscious and interested in action in our communities said, you know what, we're going to start a detox center. That's it. We're going to start a detox center because we know our children are under assault and not just inside the schools, but every institution that surrounds our communities or in our communities, the boob tube, the television, the media, our kids are bombarded. Like if we actually sat and thought about all the different messages our students get to say, you're not, at best, you're worth less. And at worst, you're worthless.
Mm.
That's the continuum that a lot of Black children operate, are thrust upon. And so suppose we just started detox centers. And what that means is it could be in your church, in your masjid, you can say if there's a school partnership that you can have and you say, hey, I'll come and run an after school program. Just give me, I want to work with 10 kids. I'll come to the lunchroom and I'll speak to them. I'll have all my clearance, all that stuff. But I'll come to the lunchroom and set up a table during lunch and say, here's what I'm offering. And let's see which students are interested. Or better yet, go and say, can I sit in the lunchroom and just get feedback? Can you send this survey to families and say, what would you like to have in an after school program or a weekend program or a summer program? If we committed to just that, but our worldview, the paradigm we were operating in, and it was a detox center, then those are the things that can evolve into something larger. But like start there. Like I talk about Nithamu Sasa all the time. And I hope, what, maybe we can get Mama Fasaha, my principal, on the show.
That would be great.
Mama Fasaha and her team started Nithamu Sasa in a basement of a home. In a basement, and that grew into this school that was all about that Angela Davis would visit, that Dr. Sonia Sanchez would come and read poems to the children, that Ben Chavis from the Wilmington 10 in North Carolina would visit. Like this, it became an institution that the community loved because of what it was producing and what the student outcomes were. It started in the basement. So start detox centers, everybody.
Well, we have churches, we have after school programs, we have people with nice houses. We got some people with some pretty nice houses, fancy places to live in, and everything doesn't have to be a formal school. I think that's the lesson I'm hearing in what you're saying, and in the lessons of our own history, is that a small groups of people could do really great things, could rescue small groups of kids. And I don't think we talk enough about out of school time, like what happens with our Black kids and brown kids and kids in poverty, period, in any city where it costs money to live, to be a person, to have access to things. So you have all this out of school time. We have in school time that we have to worry about, spend time thinking through, but we have this unstructured time afterwards, before and after school, where community members who are, I think, quick to be on the front lines of saying what the system should do, could be quick to be on the front lines of what we could do together.
Exactly.
What can we do?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we started, right? Like, at some point we got to get tired of saying somebody should be doing something about that. Somebody ought to do this and somebody ought to do that. Like, I hear that so much, and I've never been like, somebody, well, why not us? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And
like that's self-determination at its purest form. This needs to be done. I'm going to help the community do it.
And this is what I like about the work that you do so much is it is affirmative. It's like, I'm going to fill in the blank. I'm going to, like, we could argue about teachers and teaching and the pipeline of teachers and the way schools do school and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, there's still going to be a need for us to do something, like, aside. But educators are the ones that I think would be creating new opportunities, creating out of what they know and the deficiencies in the system that they know about would come ideas from them. Like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do Saturday schools, and we're going to start in Chicago, and we're going to do 15 of them. And then we're going to try and get them across 10 cities. We're going to do, like there are definitely like Jewish day schools and there are definitely Korean schools and Chinese schools and out of school time
and Islamic school. Like,
Islamic schools.
They're like, that's their form of, like,
supplement
determination. And you're missing something. Massive is missing in your education, and we're going to provide it. There's not a Black soul that goes to many of these schools. They can't say there's something missing in your education. Like, if we start with that premise and say, you know what, my Black child, there's something missing in whatever type of school they go to, unless it is fully, immersed in Black liberation, that means there's something missing. And who's going to provide it?
I just in prep for today, I saw an interview with Marion Wright Edelman, And one of the interviewers asked her why freedom schools are still necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about how, well, she kind of chuckled just a little bit. She always has a way of laughing at you without you knowing it when you ask dumb questions.
That's that wisdom. Like, let me tell you, Sonny.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, bless your heart. You got a job in television. Stay here. Don't go anywhere else, honey. That requires a brain. But anyways, her response to that was basically because 90% of the Black children in the United States are still in schools that are too inferior for them, and that our jails and our criminal justice system is still clogged up with far too many Black bodies and Black minds. And if you look at the average literacy rate of the people that are being clogged up in that system, it tells you why we need freedom schools. We need an alternative. We need something different. Because right now the Black body and mind is being railroaded directly from one system into another in ways that that if we don't feel urgent about it, there's something wrong with us. Of course, we need freedom schools because we need freedom from that. And then, in one of the stories that I was watching with her, it flipped real quick. They have these freedom schools in juvenile detention halls and in prisons now. I didn't know this. This is like a development that was new on me. And I thought to myself, like, all these billions of dollars that people spent, wouldn't it make sense to adopt a prison, one, as a pilot project at some point and go in and let every young person in there know this isn't your last stop. We actually are we're about to put a massive investment in you being free, not being incarcerated anymore. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to make sure you have every educational opportunity, every therapeutic opportunity, every prospect for vocation out of here when you leave here. And, oh, by the way, just kind of a wraparound shell of community people and members or whatnot to affirm your being, just in general. Make it a project of sorts, but make it about freedom. Like, we are incarcerating you by the millions. We need a freedom plan. And part of that definitely has to be about education. So I was so happy to see like the freedom school idea, even going into jails, even going into juvenile places, juvenile detention centers and the system there. Mm-hmm. We also need it for like foster kids in the foster care system. We need it for kids in neighborhoods and schools where it feels just like the redlining has just made them like the world's forgotten children. Detroit's like a good example of this. It could be an entire city that rallies around the freedom school concept of out of school time, what we do for kids out of school time.
No, absolutely. And you talked about the millions. I mean, and this is, it's such a lesson in all of this when the lesson that we learned from the SNCC freedom schools was that, volunteers, end up leaving, it's hard to rely on them on over a sustained period of time. And so that's where, the CDF model, you got stipends, right? And then in Philadelphia Freedom School, not only you get the stipend, but the high schools, that's summer jobs, for students who are interested. As a principal, I would have students who are like, oh yeah, I'm interested in teaching, but they were traveling an hour to go to the suburbs to flip burgers for some chain restaurant. It was like, hey, if you're interested in teaching and children and community and activism, let's pay you to do that. Let's raise money to pay you to do that instead of something else, something that's going to hone your craft, help you develop your mindset, tap into the intellectual genealogy that's absolutely vital in Black pedagogy, and then moving on for that. So I think at one point, Philadelphia had like 20 plus freedom schools.
Wow.
But, and this is why that when you talk about like the money and the finances and white allies, like making that a permanent thing, making sure that freedom schools in your city has an endowment. That's what white people could do, right? Like white wealth or Black wealth, whatever. The folks who are in positions to do that, they say, we're going to create an endowment for freedom schools in my city so that it doesn't change with an administration. It's not tied to a policy, right? Because that's what happened. It was 20 and then it dropped down. Thank God for Dr. Aisha Imani and Dr. Kelly Mickens and other folks, Dr. Greg Carr, who held on, Isaiah Thomas, who's now a councilman, they held on to make sure that it didn't fall totally to zero, but from 20 to like 3 or 4, right? Because people are just like, oh, well, policies change or our priorities. If you start with the premise that Black children are missing something, then your priority will never change until that is addressed. To say like, yes, Black children are being underserved, but our priority as far as how we're supporting them is no longer in education. It's no longer in freedom school. That is absolutely ridiculous, which meant that your heart was not in the Black liberation movement from the very beginning. You did it as something political or something convenient or something, woke on the web and that version, but it wasn't authentic. And so what we need is authentic allies, particularly those who are trained and developed by Black people. Like that. I loved how you position that, because that's exactly what it was, and that needs to continue. And so we have white allies in our work. We work with University of Michigan, Nell Duke, one of the early literacy specialists in the country, and her network. But we're also informing them, here are the type of books that we have to use. Here are the type of characters that we're using. Here is the Black culture element that may be missing, right? And so it's not like, oh, come implement this. It's like, no. We're sharing, we're informing, we're part of the development of processes.
Here's what might be a little bit different about the time that we live in versus the time that freedom schools were being thought of and started and originated. Back then, there was just a very clear understanding that the regular schools were inferior on purpose for people of color and for Black people. So because there was that level of clarity about the problem, it was hard to find people that were for or against any way of reforming that. Like there wasn't an idea of, no, we should keep it just like the way that it is right now. We should just give it more money. That was different than it is now, because we have a whole bunch of Negroes that came out of the schools afterwards who now love some system. They are system. They love the system.
Man, so their faith in these systems rivals their faith in God.
Yeah, their faith only rivals their stupidity. Like, that's the only rival that they have. Like, for their faith in the system is their stupidity. The levels of those are about the same. Like, their level of faith and their level of stupidity are just about equal. And their usefulness to their own people after they get out of college with 4, 5, 6 degrees sometimes or whatnot. Each degree, they get dumber and dumber and dumber about the system that produced them and about academia. Their language becomes hella Afrocentric and hella Afro woke and what I call Afroplastic. Like, they say all the things about equity. And when you start talking about reform, they have such a profound critique of anything that seeks to reform the system or pull kids out of it or move kids away from it. They have no critique for the system that they're saying we should just put more money into and more support. Oh, we need strong public systems. Until then, we'll put my kid in private school while we build those strong public systems. But we need all you Negroes to stay in there. Whatever.
And that's always the test. That's always the test of what people actually believe. What do you do with your own child?
Oof.
I mean, to me, that's the purity test.
They fail that test constantly.
Every single
But this is, again, so this is what's different. Is back in this day, Charles Cobb and others knew there is no defending the regular system. It is inferior on purpose. It is ruining our kids, and they're getting shorted in so many ways. We need counter institutions. We need ancillary schools or something outside of the schools. And in looking at the documents that they had back then, they were very clear about, we don't want sharecropper education anymore. We don't want to be like on somebody else's educational plantation. We want freedom. We want to create counter institutions. We know that it's within us to be able to do it. And not only that, we know it's our responsibility to do it. That's different than it is today. Today, like, all those white people that came from the north down south to help would be criticized as white saviors. And they would be told to go back up north. We got this. And they would be told that by a class of educated, elite Black folks who got degrees and run around selling books and going to conferences and shit and running nonprofits that are out here telling us that the only problem with schools is that we don't have enough Black kids with white people being educated together. And we just haven't given enough money to a system that is running a national system of starter prisons, starter welfare farms, starter pension farms, and starter prisons all across the country. Early incarceration programs is what these are. We're either going to make your mind captive or your body. You tell us which one you want. Do you want mental slavery or do you want physical slavery? Because we got both on the order for you. But then we also have a nation of Negroes who are willing to tell you that the only problem with that system is that it doesn't have enough money. Anyways, I'm sorry, Sharif. You got me.
No,
You get me fired up here, man.
Listen, Charlie Cobb in his essay, what he was driving home was, and this is his language: academic freedom. Right. And so if you fast forward today, what would constitute academic freedom? What would that constitute? Is it this is the system, and what Malcolm say was like, when something's wrong with the system, we were like, hey, we sick, boss. We sick. Something wrong with our house. Like, no, right, bro. Carter G. Woodson said you will create a backdoor for yourself if you have constricted intellectual independence. If you don't have that mindset to be intellectually free. And I think that's the beauty, I think, of having these detox centers, of having freedom schools, because you can actually have the academic freedom, which means you're making a choice of something outside of the system.
Well, let me stick with this too for a second, because the world has changed. What was different in 1964? 1964, there was philanthropy that would support the freedom schools and the efforts that these groups were making, because they saw it as the radical thing to do, regardless. It wasn't about like, oh, you're going to be privatizing the schools by taking kids out of these good public schools, these good districts. No, philanthropy was behind them in a lot of ways. Radical philanthropy, like Ford Foundation and others, were for the freedom struggle, set up alternative schools, challenge the regular systems by creating these schools and funding real activists to do real activist education work. That's different than today, where you have a lot of union aligned and union driven philanthropy that sees any attempt to take kids out of the main, awesome, beautiful, wonderful public systems as a threat. So you don't have the money there as much anymore. When you do have the money, when it does come, people come for the funders. Why are you funding privatization? Why are you funding the rights of Black people to start schools outside of the regular system? And what's different also then too is you had people like, folks should read the book Freedom Summer. It's a very good book about 1964. Sharif, I think you and I have talked about the stories like this before, where you had people like Sammy Davis Jr., Sidney Poitier, and who's the banana boat guy? Harry Belafonte?
Harry Belafonte, yeah.
Who were hiring chartered planes to fly in, drop and land in fields, put them into cars and race them to backdoor church meetings where they were bringing suitcases of money from Black celebrities to fund the movement. And they literally had to smuggle in money and being chased by the Klan, by the way. Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier being chased by the Klan in cars because they're carrying suitcases full of money from Black celebrities to fund the movement that was taking place. All of these things are different now, right? The philanthropic funding, the Black elite understanding that independent counter institutions for Black children was a good thing. And that it's not, that our goal shouldn't be to put everybody into the system and just fortify it with money. That's different now today too. So I love the work that you're doing, but we have to be real with Black people who are starting things outside of the system that they're going to face, even some of their own. It's not going to be white backlash. It's going to be their own people who have benefited from the system coming for their heads.
Oh yeah, no, it's a struggle. I mean, so there was a group who sent it out, and it was, particularly for the Black children in their community, just a flyer that we had created for our freedom schools. And they wrote back like, wow, I'm getting attacked by people saying this is racist. This is for Black children, Black and brown children only. And, and
people were saying that?
Yeah, people were telling, this was the pushback that they were getting. And we're just like, yes, it is. It is for Black and brown children. It is for Black high school and Black college students. And I agree with you. We need more radical philanthropists. And it doesn't even have to be the millionaires, right? It could be individuals who say like, hey, this is what I'm doing, my individual giving. I'm doing it to Black-led organizations. But I go back to, if that elderly Black woman in 1866 could say, I have this one copper penny and it is for the education of Black people. If she had that clarity of thought, we have no excuses to be all muddled and fuddled in our thinking.
I mean, I do like the idea that you don't have to be a millionaire to be a philanthropist. Like, I wish people would stop thinking that philanthropy starts with being rich.
Exactly.
There have been stories of like Black janitors who nobody knew were saving their whole lives, and when they die, they leave their money to some program or another. Oftentimes it's a school, and it's like $1 million, and they've saved it their whole life, to give it away. There should be some Freedom School fund that does like a Bernie type thing, which tries to get small donations from large groups of people to say, like, we've got 1 million people who donated $20 versus like we had 3 people that donated, $10 million each, like, so that more people
or have both.
We'll have both, definitely have both, but I'm saying it.
No, but
so
targeting
that start having some skin in the game.
And we've seen this. We've seen people hit our donation button for $5 a month.
I mean,
to me, like, that's the love. That's the woman with the copper penny. When somebody's like, when I get this message on my Victoria, our ops manager, gets these messages of, someone committed $5 a month to the education of Black children, but also it's also the development of future Black and Latinx teachers. Right. So it's twofold, not only for the children and their literacy and addressing spring slide and summer slide and any other, and just the racist slide that they're always on, but also the development of Black and brown teachers for the next generation. It's fantastic.
So let me ask you this. Can it really make a difference?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, all of that we're talking about right now, this sounds great. It's got all the like, oh my God, Black people, freedom. We gonna be free. No, we ain't really gonna be free no time soon. But just like, I hate to put that out there to people. Freedom ain't like,
we're liberated, but not yet free, right?
Freedom's a bus that ain't coming yet. We still at the bus stop waiting for the Freedom bus to roll up. And I'm just gonna be real with folks. It's late. And it's not on schedule. So you're going to be at that bus stop for a few minutes. You might as well whip out your phone and start doing something productive because you're going to be waiting. But that aside, can like the Freedom School thing make a difference in terms of actual academic outcomes? Like for real, like academic outcomes?
I mean, that's something that we were absolutely crucial. We didn't just want a love of reading, a culture of literacy. We wanted to tie it specifically to what is the research around phonics for rising first, second, and third graders. When they finish
now we're talking real science. Okay, here we go. Okay, all right.
The science of reading. How is phonics to be taught? Because a lot of times people are like, I want to teach reading. Like, should that one blended sound be taught before the next blended sound? Which blended sounds should be worked in conjunction? Which are the words that help reinforce it? Like, all of this is science. People have actually studied and researched like how to teach Black children reading well. That's what we wanted to tap into, right? We want to tap into Dr. Alfred Tatum's books around, hey, I don't want any Black child to be proficient in reading. I want them to be extraordinarily great readers,
to be masters.
Exactly. That's what, not proficient. Proficient means like, oh yeah, you're meeting the bar. He's like, Dr. Alfred Tatum out of Detroit is like, nah, that's hardly good enough for my own children. So why would it be good enough for me to say it's okay for yours? Yeah. Right. So my daughter, she's rising first grader. She was, and so we call and we assess the students because we want them to be in the right reading groups, right? It's not just, hey, show up and come up. Somebody from our organization calls, with the parent, sets up an appointment. Hey, we want to see where your child is in word recognition and other, phonics and phonemic awareness. And we are building, then they will be in a group. And every Friday, they get reshuffled. If you've made the progress, then we're reshuffling you to the next group so you can move as quickly as possible, because we only have, it's a very short period. We have 4 weeks, but we believe, the research says, if we get X amount of this type of instruction around phonics, we can make a movement. And guess what? When we talk about like this intellectual genealogy, I remember as a child, my mother would take me to my cousin's house, who was also in the Panther Party, and we would learn phonics on her indoor porch, and this was the schooling some of the Black Panther parties did. So, right. So we had, in addition to the freedom schools, you also had these Black power liberation schools that they would call them. Right. And so we learned the alphabet differently when I was 2 and 3 years old. We didn't do the A, B, C, because that doesn't match the sounds that they actually made. What we learned was Abacada efaga haija kalamana pa quarasata of a what?
Sharif, what are you saying to me right now, bro?
Abacada. That's
what?
the sound. That's because that's what the letters.
What?
Yes, that's how I learned how to read. And that's how many Black children in liberation schools learn. So we're doubling down on what the science.
That sounds like pig Latin, bro. What is that?
Abaca.
Abaca.
Abacada efaga G. Does when you know it also makes different sounds.
Really?
Exactly. Yeah. It blows your mind, bro. Like this is there's a science behind things. There's a tradition, and there's also this idea of like, you know, and again, when we don't inform and teach white people about the education of our children, then this is when phonics was very heavy in the Black community, and schools that were teaching Black children to read well. Phonics was heavy. At some point, it was hijacked and said, no, you don't need that. You just read in general. Just all you have to do is have a love of books. And even if the word says mule, and if the kid says horse, it's okay. They recognize that it was an animal, right? Like if you're
this is true. Like I did not know this. If you're keen
in Black liberation, then you're not gonna have that kind of thought of like, we don't have the margins to do that nonsense.
I feel like we don't know, like as civilians, non-educators, that there are these wars or these things that go on, like that educators are thinking about the best way, like what you just said. This is science-based, and this is a thing. And I'm sitting here like thinking to myself, oh my God, I've never heard of that. And it sounds crazy to me. It sounds like what we used to do, like the double Dutch talk in the 70s, like what Albert and you know, like, but if there's a science behind it, I'm for it, you know. But it's interesting. Had Natalie Wexler on yesterday, who's a reading, is an education journalist who's been studying reading. Emily Hanford and I are talking. Hopefully she's going to come on the show to discuss the same. And there've been these arguments about, like, you know, phonics versus whole reading, whole leveled reading and balanced literacy and all these other things. And if you're a parent, I don't think that you know that all of this stuff is going on with educators, and that you might be in a school with educators who are on the wrong team when it comes to things like phonics, or how you teach reading or whatnot. That's a problem that we don't know that's going on. So anyways, I just think it's amazing. Even listening to what you just said, you just blew my mind with the hubba bubba thing that you just talked about.
I saw your face. Hey,
what?
Look, I want to make sure, you know, that people get an idea of like the type of teachers that Freedom School. So not only, so your question is about, can it make a difference? We believe, yes, it can. You know, last year, the high school college students who participated, 85% of them, and some of them were ed majors, 85% of them said they were more interested in teaching than they were beforehand. Many of them said that they learned more in the 8 weeks that they were with us, because for them, the high school and college students, it's an all-day program. It's training. The anchor book is Education of Black People by W.B. Du Bois. So that's the anchoring text for us for this summer. And that's what they'll be reading. For the fall, we have a year-round Freedom Schools. The fall anchor book will be the Lost Education of Horace Tate. Right. And so these are high school and college youth that we are making sure that they have the political awareness of what Black education means. And then we're working with folks like Dr. Nell Duke and others at University of Michigan for the research around early literacy. So combine it. And again, we're talking about like Black empowerment. This is something that the high school youth, even after Freedom School, they can use these activities with their younger brother, younger cousin and sister, you know, a neighbor. Like they'll have this, they'll have a basic understanding of, hey, this is how phonics is aware. But I wanted to expose you to like just one of the teachers we have. I sent you an email because I couldn't put it in the chat.
Right, you know I don't like email.
I know you don't, but
email is a tool of the devil. Along with
text
PowerPoint.
It to you? But I didn't know how was the easiest way for you to show the audience. Just
why you got to be so Eurocentric.
A glimpse of now. When you see this, you can be like, "Oh, this ain't Eurocentric at all." You know? Oh no, you know what? I will Slack it to you, bro. How about
you that? Know, Slack is kind of my friend right now.
I forget all the technological tools we have at our fingertips. I still like.
I need the fastest, easiest.
I still like paper and pen. I still love that.
Yeah, well, I'm not a scribe. I'm not that far into the thing. But yeah, email it to me. I will read it, of course.
Well, I
If it comes
emailed it
from you.
already. Well,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I would love for you if you could
Oh,
just
you emailed
play
it
it for
already,
the,
so you're gonna put me
yeah.
on blast like that, right?
Yeah.
On Freedom
Well,
Friday, huh?
hey, look, man. Because I really was. Here's Anshere Hines is one of our teachers in our Freedom School movement. Brilliant young sister. You know, she grew up in the Freedom Schools, and so I just want to give an example. And she's now a teacher. So she grew up in Freedom School as a child, and now, when I look at her, I'm just like, man, I hope my daughter, who's growing up in Freedom School as a child, you know, ends up like a Hines, right? Like Hines is. I want her to train Zainab as part of her replacement, part of her core replacement. But I put it in Slack because I would love for the audience to kind of just see. Here's an example of a child who grew up in Freedom School and now she's teaching, but what her worldview is, how her paradigm, how she's thinking about the education of Black people.
I love the fact that generations, that you see success over generations. So you have a child today who goes through this and comes back and teach. To me, I've always loved those stories. Like even within people's schools, like, you know, you ask somebody who's doing really good work as an educator or bold work, the type of work you're doing, where'd you come from? Like, that's the question you want to know is like, who produced you? Like, where did you come from?
Who's your intellectual genealogy? Where? Let me see that tree.
Exactly. We need like ancestry.com for culturally affirmed Black people in education.
Mindsets. Yeah.
Let's see where you came from.
Absolutely.
And yours, I mean, people are always very fascinated, I think, with your story, with your demeanor, your intellect, your knowledge, your education story. And I think, you know, we've covered a lot on 8 Black Hands and even here together that you have one of the rarer educational journeys than the rest of us. And it says a lot about what can happen when your family and your community understand the nature of racism and its structures and they remove their kids from it. Like they take their kids out of the toxic pool and put them into safe harbor during their developing years. I think that's how you get a Sharif El-Mekki. I think the way that you get a Chris Stewart is you do the opposite. You dunk a Black child's brain in like a tea bag in the toxic systems and racism and just keep dunking them. It's like dunk, dunk, dunk until, you know, you make kind of what you consider to be like a cynical tea. At the same time that you have kind of like a Black Panther father and a hippie mom, you get a Chris Stewart. So I think it's really interesting to see how everything that we talk about could be creating for the next generation a healthier, more culturally affirmed, more confident group of people of color who are ready to lead and lead themselves for sure, and to experience and practice and demand freedom as one of their main missions in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yo, play the tape, bro.
What tape, man?
Stewart, the one I just put in Slack. Play that for the audience.
Play. What am I going to be playing, man?
It's a video. It's a video of the teacher that I want just people to just see. This is we have like nations in our Freedom School, and each nation is named after a historic Black educator. And so what she did was she created this just to be thinking about the type of person who's like, oh yeah, my children are going to learn about the history of Black pedagogy and the history of Black educators, right? Like this is what the high school youth are going to be learning about. And then she's going to challenge. And what she did was she tapped into a medium that they understand and they enjoy. So she turned it into a rap song to educate. Right. They're not teaching this in most teacher colleges. Right. But because she grew up in this movement, she understands that, you know, because I know a lot of times you give like you give pushback to
on the hip hop thing.
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
But I want to give you an example of here's a teacher. She has a master's from University of Pennsylvania in literature. She has her bachelor's in education from Howard University, HU. Right. And she's grew up in Freedom Schools. This is the type of person that I want to help that I want to be part of the educating white people about education, right? And I think that was just a really important part. You know, we saw it in SNCC, and SNCC also said like you're going to be protected because the FBI ain't going to let them kill you like they're going to kill us, you know.
Wait,
so,
say that again now.
when the white people were coming to support SNCC,
Yeah.
SNCC leaders are like, you know, a lot of them were nervous. You know, their parents were like, no, don't go down there, Mississippi. And SNCC leaders like, don't worry about it. They ain't gonna let, you know. And I don't want to deny some white people were killed in the movement, but the vast majority were protected. You know. Yeah. This is Miss Hines, grew up in Freedom Schools, and she has I appreciate her because. I hit the sound, bro. Well, don't.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on. You get ahead of yourself, man. Hold on one second. You didn't tell me I was gonna have technical situations here. All right?
Listen, I would never be able to pull this off, but I figured you would be able to.
I can see already, though. I see some dancing, man. I see some dancing.
We in Freedom School, we definitely believe in cultural expression.
So
if people visit our website, they will see a whole lot of, you know, in Harambe, we're singing.
This is who I'm trying to be. She was the fourth black woman with a PhD. Her name is Anna Julia Cooper. She didn't let nobody press up or mess up her knowledge, but she was an educator, teaching young people. And she taught for many years in Washington. She used a tablet to work. She proved that learning is a habit. You gotta use it. Even though black women scholars weren't the norm, Anna Julia Cooper knew that she could perform, learning French in the morning and Latin in the evening. Deep education is our path to freedom. And jokers are wild, but they thought they could tame a strong black woman with no shame in her game. Those folks are enemies, not even a friend of me, because she knew being great was in her destiny. Determined, she didn't put her work on pause, working hard because she knew that her work had a cause. She wrote a book they called A Voice from the South to say some remember women are the ones that we all come from, and they shouldn't have to suffer or be treated rougher. We need to protect her so we can all live better. Fight for what she knew was right with a good fight. Is Anna Julia Cooper, alright? She ain't no joke.
Yo, bro, that's you know that, and you probably recognize that tune too, that beat that.
Yes,
that
I do. Yes, I do. That was from the real era of hip hop.
It was, you know, but no, that's just you know, a small example of like some of the things that how they are using. So, Miss Cooper is one of the nations that students will be learning about. So we have Cato, Octavius Cato, we have Marcus Foster, we have Septima Clark. And we have Miss Julia Cooper. So those are the four black educators that they'll be learning about this summer as high school students, in addition to working with first, second, and third grade elementary school students in literacy. And then they also have their own anchor book for leadership development, political knowledge, and leadership development with W.B. Du Bois' book of black education of black people.
I love it, man. So listen, you know, I give a hard time to the whole hip hop thing, just in general, in education.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that white person you should just go create a video and say like that's no, teaching.
That's my point. Is this isn't the thing that I hammer on. This is lovely. I love this. This is different. It's just when people there's some really bad videos that we should show when people don't know what they're doing and they run and take something like this and try it in their class and it comes out offensive on the other end. So anyways, no, I love this. Where can people find this? Because you sent this to me in a file, so I had to you know, like open this and whatnot. So is it somewhere on the internet?
It will be on www.thecenterblacked.org, and there are a lot of different videos like that trying to teach you know, just share the intellectual genealogy, like sharing here's the black pedagogy. Because when we say Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and other places 96% of the teachers are white, it's not just who's leading the classroom. If your pipeline of teachers is 96% white or 80% or whatever, but your students, black and brown students, are higher percentages, what that means is it's not just who's leading the classroom, it's who leads the school, who ends up being elected on school board, who writes the curriculum, who decides how black students are being taught reading, right? 96% of those decisions will be in the hands of white people. And what we're saying is we're pushing back and saying, no, if we start off with black liberation, that means black people need to be the decision makers about the curriculum, the disciplinary policies, the politics of it all, and who's leading the classroom.
Conscious black people.
Yes.
Conscious black people. Because
but when I say, but that's the thing. When I say black people,
That's who you mean.
It's
and I've learned this
inherently
from you.
like-
I've learned this from you. You
Mhm.
know, you're the one who told me to start saying we don't just need more Black people.
Oh,
we
absolutely.
need conscious Black people. And I wasn't even saying that before. So
Mhm.
you
No, absolutely.
I think you're right about we need to be setting the stage more. But honestly, you can't solve problems at the same level that they were created, the same level of thinking. And many of our own people are some of the greatest theorists of the same level of thinking. So let's just make sure that we, at some point in the future, do a show on the unconscious Black teacher. Because I think there would be a way to watch this and feel like if you're a white teacher, well, goddamn, I got like 8 hurdles to get over to be really woke, to be a great educator, blah, blah. And in some cases, they're doing better work and a better job than some of our own teachers. And no one's going to tell that story, right? No one really is going to touch that too much except for Chris Stewart, because I don't give a damn when people come for me. But you're not supposed to say it, but it's absolutely true. There are great people in classrooms watching this on Fridays who have lots of respect for. There are a lot of people who are not watching or having or engaging in these type of discussions who sound very much like the system when they talk. Like when they talk about our kids and they talk about education or whatnot, they're definitely falling into the deficit, poverty driven, narrative about our people. And if they could only act right and whatever, blah, blah, whatever. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why it's so important to, when we talk about like intellectual genealogy and how do you think about Black children, your worldview as a Black person, like, what is it? Where did you develop it? How did you develop it? Are you there at all? Right. Because, many of our freedom fighting ancestors warned us because they're not new, they're not new at all. It's a new version of the house Negro, might as well be called the school Negro.
Oh my goodness. Damn. That's a whole different show.
It is.
That one. We had to have the opposite of Freedom Friday.
Yeah,
we have like,
yeah, no, go ahead. The opposite of Freedom Friday. What's it going to be called?
I mean, we had to have something that, like, right now we keep talking about freedom and Black schools and liberation and all of that. And we're
talking about education, right? We're talking about education, and as they said, schooling and education are not the same thing. Carter G. Woodson said there's a whole lot of ignorant people that hold college degrees. That ain't good enough. You need something else.
That's true. The talented 10th. So maybe we have talented Tuesdays when we could talk all about our talented people, our talented Negroes who are just so happy with themselves and their awards that they win and their 6 and 7, 8 degrees that they got and their books that they write that only white people read and their conference schedules that they have to be having these conferences that they do. And the way that I'm kind of animated about this today. I know we got to wrap and we're coming to an end. The opposite of freedom and Freedom Fridays and freedom schools and freedom education theory and liberationist education theory and even abolitionist thinking is that oftentimes the people who are using those terms and writing it so that they can get speaking fees to talk before audiences and look super hella Afrocentric while they're actually just pitching the re-captivity of ourselves in the mainline systems. Like, it's a really weird, clever argument for how we should have nothing except for the existing system, but just double down on it, like put more money into it or something. The real interesting thing I think with them is that they do hold a lot of court. They take up a lot of space, and they come so hot and gunning for reforms. And it drives me absolutely crazy. And the reason I'm animated this week is I'm seeing more of it this week than ever. Like gloating over failures in a charter school or gloating over the failing of a choice program somewhere, or the Supreme Court or a court comes down and ends kind of pathways out of the system into private schools, for instance, and they cheer it. And they're such privileged Negroes. Like you're watching them online talk about how white supremacy is basically school choice, and these type of things. But they're not starting a school program. They're not starting a school. Oh. They don't have anything other than their.
You mean the real work?
So yeah, they're not doing any of the work. They have lots of critique on critical race theory, critique of the current system and white supremacy and blah blah blah. All this type of shit. And then you're like, okay, this is cool. You have a critique for charter schools. You have a critique for people running schools that are getting good test scores. You have a critique for test scores themselves, even though you passed a few of them to get your damn PhD that you have right now. Your privileged ass passed a few of them yourself, but no, it's certainly not good for everybody else. You got a critique for everything. You don't have a critique for the damn educational institution that turns your whack ass out, right? You don't have a critique for the funders who are funding your ass to say dumb shit about freedom and freedom of choice and the ability to choose schools on your own and the ability to have counter institutions. No. You have no heat for the system itself, but you're so you love yourself so much. Just got so much to say. Anyways, I'm sorry, bro. I'm just going on and on.
No, listen, you're absolutely right. I mean, and this goes back to a couple of things. One, people are, when I see people who bring all this heat for any type of reform that's touching 1% or 3% or 5% of Black students who are drowning, right? And they bring all their energy, their entire careers are pointing cannons at components that are addressing 5%, and they almost are muted when they're talking about where 95% of Black students are going and where half of the Black boys are not graduating. I rarely hear that. Let's talk about in your city, wherever you are, what's the Black graduation rate? And I'm not talking about those trumped up numbers that people just, look, our graduation rate went up by 10%. I'm talking about graduation rate and literacy, like combined. To me, that means you're graduating. You can read. Like, other than that, you just got a piece of paper that you might not even be able to read, right? And so what is your heat and energy against that? And second that with, where does your child go to school? Does it go to where half the Black boys are failing? I think not. So,
and where did you go to school too? I like to ask that question now too, because what you saw this, and I'm not going to name names today. I'm just going to be good with my Jesus this morning. But I sent you a link of a couple of Negroes in a thread who had been tagged in by white anti-choice, very well-known people nationally, basically to say that school choice is a white supremacist joke. On communities of color. So you have a white woman who's a nationally known anti-choice person who herself sent her kids to private schools, tag in two Negroes with too many degrees into a discussion, and they come with the school choice is about white supremacy and breaking down systems and blah, blah. One of them is a private school parent. One is a private school alumni whose dad kept him out of the regular system and put him in. Both of them are making an argument for how we need to double down on the public good and public systems. We need public systems more than ever, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a sister who picks up these two Negroes' ignorance and doubles down on it herself. Now, all three of them are PhDs with multiple master's degrees who don't have kids in the public systems they're saying we all should support.
They're defending so valiantly.
They're defending like, no. We need more of y'all on the plantation. Yeah.
Look at it like this.
The plantation. Well, never. I'm not coming over to the plantation. But yeah, y'all stay there.
Here's the thing about this, man. A lot of folks are talking about, the same people say the only thing that needs to fix. They say forget the mindset. Like I say, I think the inherent problem with institutions of America, including schools, is racism. They think the inherent problem is the lack of money. So let's look at this. Let's look at these two institutions. And we talked about this a little bit on the 8 Black Hands. So the educational institutions and police institutions. So would we say today that only thing that's wrong with police departments, the fact that they're murdering people and all this stuff, all they need is more money? You'd sound like an idiot saying that. And I look at you as an idiot if you say all educational institutions need is more money. The inherent problem, the root of the issue, the tree
Sharif,
is racism.
That's true, but you're missing a major point. Let me help you out, brother.
Please do, because I don't understand it.
Well, the police unions don't pay speaking fees to Negroes with 8 degrees who want to pontificate.
I bet you they'll start. I bet.
Well,
remember,
right now
they had that sheriff in Texas. True. They were paying. Was that the sheriff in Texas? It was a sheriff somewhere that was going around saying, "No, this is all good. It's all the protest. You have no right to speak loudly about not being murdered. What's the matter with you? Whisper that."
Yeah. Why? Here's what I need from my people watching this and listening. We talked today about freedom schools, and we should be talking about freedom everything, because honestly, our only goal right now is power and freedom. Those are the only two things we have to worry about. So let's start arguing about everything else in the world, about anything else, and ask ourselves the question, whatever you're proposing, whatever your argument is, how free does it make us? How much freer does it make us now? Negroes, if we are going to talk with each other and we're going to argue about something, does your program offer me more opportunity and options and avenues and pathways, or fewer? Because if you are offering me fewer opportunities and pathways than what I have right now, you lose the debate. You're not about freedom. You're about captivity, right? Or is what you're pitching offering me access to things that are of a higher quality, meaning like, better teachers, better learning, better outcomes, more attention to teaching, learning, and outcomes, or less? Because if it's about less, you lose. I don't care if you put the word abolitionist on it. I don't care if you put the word Afrocentric. I don't care if you wrap your entire book in kente cloth, right? And dip it in Parliament Funkadelic soundtracks and everything else. I don't care what you do with it. You can put every kind of stank on it, every kind of Afrocentric, whatever. You can go.
You went from kente cloth to Funkadelic?
Like, that's all it, lady. Where do you think Funkadelic comes from? It comes from the motherland. What's wrong with you? You don't hear that in the drum beats. You don't hear that in the drum beats.
I hear something. They distract me with all the costumes, but go ahead.
Now you're going to get kicked off the show. Now you're going to get kicked off this show, brother. You know what I'm saying. My point is that
I hear you.
If you want to sell this regressive theory about we should stay in the system, the best way to do it is to wrap it in kente cloth and find Negroes who are willing to jump out there and talk about, I'm about hip hop captivity. I'm about Afrocentric captivity. I'm about, whatever. They can't just be out here saying, I want to put you back in the system that's been harming you for years, because that wouldn't work. That would sound bad. But if a hostile nation or if a white person were saying the things that they were saying, which is, listen, Black people, what do you have to lose by just doubling down on the system that pays our pensions? We would be mad, wouldn't we? Would we find that a little suspicious? We're less suspicious when it's Dr. MSNBC coming to tell us, look, Negroes, I'm a Negro too. The best we can do is staying in these broken down ass schools. Anyways,
it's fair. I think some of them are saying like, hey, we are in these schools, so how do we get people to shift their thinking? But I would just rather see far more Black institutions, Black-led institutions. And what Charlie Cobb said in '63 in his essay to SNCC to start schools, this is this young 20. My thing is, if these 21-year-olds can have the foresight and the insight and the banner of Black liberation to say, we actually need our own schools, right? Like how do they, but you got 40 and 50-year-olds who don't get it, right? Like to me, that's a big part of it. And I can't help but to keep going back to that quote we talked about a while ago is all Black people ain't in it to end white supremacy. Some of them, it is to further their position in it. If they can have a better seat at the white supremacist table, then forget all y'all. Like my kids are going to the same schools that the rest of the white supremacist kids are going to.
Yeah, I just want to, and we're going to wrap here, and this is going to be a bad thing to say, but you blew my mind a while ago when you said this thing about some people just fighting to have a better position within white supremacy, and they're fighting to end it. They're just fighting to have a better position within it.
And I got to find out who I
love that quote.
Yeah.
But I feel like, we talk a little bit, I think more than most, we talk about the talented 10th, the Negro class, who, if there were no white people, this talented 10th Negro class would themselves be setting up an ebony tower and setting up like a ebony supremacy table themselves. And everything would be on a class basis.
We'd be talking about class wars.
We'd be talking about class wars more than we talk about right now, because we are losing. Let's say there are no white people right now today in this discussion. We have a battle with the same people who consider themselves our intellectual leaders, our learned class, our educated Negroes that are killing us. We still have a struggle with them that we have not won either. And I don't hear many people wanting to talk about that. But everything I just said, this goofy kind of like tangent I went on earlier, is based around that. It's like we send these people to college and they come back weird. And the longer they stay, the weirder they get. The longer they stay up there, like, bro, we might need to restrict the number of degrees that Negroes can get for a while, have a moratorium, not forever, not pause. I love education. I want my people to become very educated. We just need to maybe have a moratorium on it so that we can figure things out. See, like, why are they coming back so weird all the time? Why they start saying dumb shit like, hey, the system is great, we should stay in it, we should just give it more money, because I'm worried about their alma maters if they're turning out people who say such dumb shit to Black people. Like, the only thing wrong with the system is it don't have enough money. That's so stupid. I can't even. Anyway, save me, brother. As we run out the end here, and I just said a bunch of stuff that people are going to come for me for. Go ahead and save me. Rescue the show, bro.
No. I mean, listen, it's hard to argue against you, even though I might say it differently. What you're saying is like, it's a real phenomenon. And I also just want to caution quickly, those of you who think that private schools are the salvation, white-led private schools are the salvation, you should visit on Instagram, and I mentioned this on 8 Black Hands, Black Mainline Speaks. And what it is a collection of short anecdotes of Black and Latinx students and what they experience. So my thing is, if they're already sitting at the white supremacist table, and they're sending their children to schools like this that are just anti-Black as well, then what's the next generation? So we're raising the next generation with, like Sister Hines and all our colleagues and the high school students. They're going to have to, the next generation of fight is still, this group that was raised there and not developed a consciousness in their home or in their schools, like they're unified in anti-Blackness, and then against the folks who are pro-Black. Right? Like that is going to continue. But I would say, just to close out as far as like our original topic, man, like, one, I love this idea of radical philanthropy. Don't think that you have to have a B for billion in your bank account to support Black institutions. This idea of creating toxic detox centers to counter the negative messages that Black and Latinx students receive incessantly from the media, but even more importantly, when they're a captive audience in schools and are receiving those messages nonstop. And then let's question people's intellectual genealogy. Like, what's their mindset? Yes. How did it develop? How do they think about Black liberation? Not just, oh, this is what I think about school. No, what do you think about Black liberation? And how is it furthered by your plan? That's the question. How is it furthered by your plan?
And we should ask everybody that.
Everybody. Everybody. That's something we should be asking ourselves. It's something I'm definitely always contemplating. I want to be held accountable for it. And I want people to question me. And then everyone should be questioned. How does Black Liberation banner furthered advance by the plan that you are spouting?
Well, that's a great place to end. As always, Fridays are my favorite days. I get up every morning and do a morning broadcast, but Fridays are my favorite broadcast. And I appreciate you, Brother El-Mekki, for coming on and entertaining my ignorance on things sometimes.
No.
And what and helping me exercise what it is I'm really trying to say. And I appreciate that. Definitely appreciate everybody who comes and listens and watches and adds these awesome comments that I go back and read afterwards.
I read this now, highly deodorized aromatic word.
I go back and read the comments. I'm like, damn, y'all had a better conversation than we did.
I do that all the time. I'm like, yo, and I can't even keep up while we're doing this. I read it after. I'm like, yo, this is the whole show just in the comments, both the resources, the wisdom, and the comments,
the links, there were a few questions in this today that I'm going to go back to. So thank you, Deb Meyer and Christina Laster, as always, Toya, Michelle. We just have like a solid crew of folks that add things in here, but there's some like I had never heard of, like, Prescott College came up in the comments here, and I took a quick look and saved it for later. I always get this really rich feedback from our people. So I love Fridays. I love the people who come and do this. We don't have a book giveaway this week, but we are starting a book club based on Dr. Tommy Curry's work. I want to keep people abreast of that as we get going. I think it's going to be within a week or so.
Yeah, get the title again. Do you remember the title offhand?
So Dr. Curry's work in general, we did a show with Dr. Curry, and it ranged across things. He has something called racial realist pedagogy that's based on critical race theory, but he has a book called Man Not. And his book on Man Not is specific around Black males and Black boys and the way that they are I want to say, I don't know what the best word for it is, but killed slowly over time by the system, I think is the best way to put it. So anyways, these are meant to be, I think, informative exchanges of information that we really need to be having in education. And I give it to my people sometimes that are doing lots of the theorizing work, but it's only to push us all to think about freedom, to think about liberty, not to think in terms of politics and policies on their own. None of them are the end all be all. But we've talked about charter schools. We've talked about private schools. We've talked about vouchers. We've talked about different angles on gaining freedom. But freedom schools, to me, feels like the conversation we need to keep having, because at very lower levels and lower dollar amounts, we could be working towards this goal. Not everybody can start a charter school, but everybody can give $10, $15 to a freedom fund to get more kids into freedom schools in their out of school time. And we can grow a movement from there. And it can be a multiracial movement that is pro-Black, right? Right now, we have a lot of like anti-Black liberalism and people of colorisms of Black issues. This, I think, is a better way of helping allies be productive and helping train them to be productive so that we all win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just love the idea of, white people, if you want, a lot of people ask, I wrote a blog about this, like, what can I do? Like find the Black people who are advancing the banner and learn from them, ask for to be under their tutelage, learn from them. This is how the Black liberation cause is effective. Don't try to hijack it. Don't try to preach to them about what needs to happen. Say, hey, I'm here to learn and learn authentically, which means that you have to sit down, you have to be quiet, and you have to listen and learn.
I would alter that advice just a little bit, Brother Almekki.
Let's hear it.
If you're a white person and you're looking for Black people to work with and give you license to be woke or whatever it is you want to be, you're trying to do or whatnot, be as shrewd a consumer for that as you are for insurance for your house or anything else. To look for Black people that have academic receipts. Don't just look for Black people that entertain you or write a book where you think, oh, I read this book over the weekend and now I'm hella Black or I understand the Black experience. I'm going to rap to my kids on Tuesday. No. Ask a different question, because that's not how you would choose anything else in your life. You wouldn't just be looking for an insurance agent who makes you feel good. You'd be looking for an insurance agent that knows a little something about insurance. When it comes to Black people in education, look up the receipts. And if you have a bunch of Black people you're supporting who are doing education, theorizing and commentary, and they don't have any receipts with Black children in education, it's incumbent upon you to look out, to seek out better Black allies. I'm just saying, because I think it'd be very easy as a white ally to find people that make you feel comfortable.
The easy route out. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Make you feel radical and comfortable and revolutionary, and you ain't pushing nothing that's helping Black children.
Well, it's a whole lot of It's a whole lot of woke folks who are woke on the web, and they're following Black people. They're tagging in Black people. They're getting co-signed by them, and I'm like, yo, that's madness. That has nothing to do. They're getting
license from them.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Black liberation. You can't replicate that. You don't want to replicate that mindset. Money shouldn't be thrown behind that type of mindset cultivation. Like, no, actually, you should feel uncomfortable during the entire lesson.
I love it. Be uncomfortable. Damn it. Anyways, well, thank you, Brother El-Mekki. Thank you to our listeners, our viewers, our watchers. We appreciate all of you all, and we're going to continue this conversation week over week, trying to bring more heat on the things that really matter for Black education and for us to reclaim the Black mind. 8 million Black children walking into public schools every day who are finding environments that aren't ready for them, won't help them reach their highest potential, definitely have a better chance of putting them on the pathway towards economic exile, incarceration, or welfare than putting them on the path for greatness, self-determination, and running communities and running countries and running a nation. We have 3 Black senators in the United States. One of them was the first Black woman senator ever in history, and it's 2020, right? So unless you're talking about power, unless you're talking about something that results in power, real power, you're not talking about nothing. Anyways, thank you, Sharif El-Mekki, for putting the Center for Black Ed there in the comments. Folks, if you want to hear more about Sharif's work, that's one way to get to him. Also, his Twitter handle has been going across the bottom. It's Selmekki, Selmekki, on Twitter. You can find him. You can find me, of course, Citizen Stewart on Twitter. I wouldn't suggest it unless you're ready for some heat, some magic, some black magic. We're doing the thing. Anyways, love y'all. Have a great weekend and a great week. And let's, as always, work for the power for our kids.